Welcome back to the deep dive. So if you've always thought the story of cannabis consumption, really kicked off in Central Asia, well, get ready. Today we're looking at sources that honestly paint a pretty surprising picture about smoking cannabis, like the act of smoking it.
Yeah, it really shifts the perspective. I mean, we're right to connect Asia with the plant itself, biologically speaking, but the sources we've got strongly suggest that smoking it, using a pipe, getting that fast effect, that wasn't Asia. That idea that innovation seems to have really taken hold in Africa first.
Okay, Africa, that's unexpected. So let's unpack this. Our mission today really is to follow this trail across continents. We're going from like ancient sweets that took hours to kick in to something much more immediate, how geography and local tech basically rewired this plant's whole deal.
Exactly. And that rewiring, it's the difference between, planning your afternoon around a snack and having an instant ritual. A huge difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning. Section 1, the slow burn. Before pipes got involved with cannabis, what did using it actually look like? I mean, 1,000 years ago, nobody's passing a joint.
No, definitely not. You'd be prepping a drink or maybe a food item. For centuries, the main way was ingestion. You swallowed it. That was the standard. Pretty much everywhere from the Middle East across to India.
And these weren't simple things, right? They were often quite elaborate, culturally significant.
Oh, absolutely. In India, you had Bang, this cannabis paste they'd whisk into milk, often a communal drink, maybe cooling. And then in Persia, the wider Islamic world, you find majun, that's cannabis resin mixed into like honeyed sweets, fancy stuff, really valued.
Right. And I think it's crucial for you listening to get why this mattered for the experience. Why do we call it the slow burn?
It boils down to biology, really. When you eat or drink cannabis, the THC doesn't just hit your bloodstream. It takes the scenic route through your digestive system. Then your liver gets involved, and the liver changes it. Delta-9 THC becomes 11-hydroxy-THC. That's different.
Yeah.
Often feels stronger, definitely lasts longer, but it takes time.
So you're not getting that 5-minute onset like with smoking. You could be waiting, what, an hour? More.
Easily 1 to 4 hours, sometimes even longer. Yeah.
Wow.
And that makes the whole thing kind of unpredictable, doesn't it? You take some, wait an hour, nothing. Maybe you take more. Then bam, 3 hours later, the first dose hits. It really demanded patience or maybe very specific timing for rituals. It just wasn't designed for an immediate effect.
Sounds like it fit a different kind of use, maybe more ceremonial, less about a quick mood shift. But wasn't there some evidence of burning it, not just eating it, like incense?
Yes, that's another good point, showing the lack of focus on speed. We do have finds from Central Asian graves, way back like 500 BCE, cannabis burned in braziers. But all the signs point to incense, scenting the air, maybe a slow, smoky vibe over time. No pipes. Nothing designed to get a concentrated hit quickly into the lungs. It was slow diffusion.
Okay, so let's picture the world around, say, 1,000 CE. Asia got cannabis down as a food, a drink, a slow, drawn-out thing dictated by digestion. That's the baseline. So why? Why would anyone even think of a different way? What prompted the change?
Well, that takes us to the Great Shift. And the shift happens because the plant itself starts moving. And when it lands in a new place, it runs into totally different ways of doing things, different tools.
Right, the plant travels. How to get from Asia to Africa, that's a big jump.
Mostly across the Indian Ocean. Those monsoon winds were like clockwork for trade. So between about 1,000 and 1,500 CE, it travels on ships along those existing sea routes. It seems to have landed first along the Swahili coast, think modern Kenya, Tanzania. And from there, it gradually moved inland along African trade networks.
Okay, so the plant arrives. Now here's the pivot point. Why didn't folks in Africa just start making their own bang, their own majin? Why did smoking suddenly become the go-to?
Because, and this is key, unlike many parts of Asia at the time, numerous African cultures already had pipes. They had established traditions of smoking various plants, herbs, roots, medicinal stuff. The technology was there.
The hardware was waiting.
Precisely. So when cannabis shows up, they don't necessarily see it as a new food ingredient. They see it as, hey, here's another thing we can probably smoke. They adapted the pipes they already had, and boom, for seemingly the first time in a big way, cannabis becomes something you inhale. That's the massive change.
And just putting it in a pipe, that simple act, is what our sources say rewired the plant's rhythm. Let's revisit the chemistry. Why is inhaling so different?
Sure. So when you inhale the smoke, it goes straight into your lungs, which are packed with blood vessels. The THC bypasses your stomach, bypasses your liver, and goes almost straight into your bloodstream. From there, it's seconds, maybe minutes to the brain. You completely flip the script from that hours-long metabolic process to a rapid 5-minute onset. It turned cannabis from this slow, sometimes unpredictable edible into an immediate, controllable experience. Africa basically changed the drug's relationship with the human body.
And this isn't just guesswork or old stories. Section 3, we have actual physical evidence for this, right? Proof that's undeniably African.
We do. The absolute earliest lab-confirmed proof we have for cannabis smoking comes from Ethiopia, specifically the highlands, around the Lalibela area known for its rock-cut churches. They found pipe bowls there, and testing showed cannabis residue inside them. The dating, around 1320 CE.
1320 CE. Okay, let that sink in. Why is that date so important in saying this was an African innovation?
Because it's centuries before tobacco exploded onto the global scene after Columbus, centuries before tobacco really standardized smoking pipes worldwide. The folks in Lalibela figured out how to smoke cannabis and built the tools for it, totally independent of that later European-driven tobacco boom. It was homegrown tech, indigenous invention.
And the tech itself sounds fascinating. Not factory-made pipes, obviously. What were they using?
Yeah, pure resourcefulness, making do with what was around. The sources talk about people in Eastern and Southern Africa developing things like early water pipes, often using hollowed-out calabash gourds, filling them with water to cool the smoke down.
Ingenious,
Right.
right? And they'd use things like antelope horns for the bowl part, maybe thin reeds for the draw tube.
Yeah.
It's really local materials, smart engineering, all focused on getting that smoke effectively.
That really paints a picture. Organic, local tech for communal practice. And we know it became central because later travelers actually saw it happening, right? Yes, absolutely. Fast forward a few centuries to the 1600s, 1700s. European travelers start showing up in southern Africa, places like Mozambique, the Cape. And their accounts are quite detailed. They talk about seeing cultivated gardens specifically for Dagga, that was a common name for cannabis, clearly grown to be smoked.
What kind of details did they notice about the smoking itself?
They often describe these rituals happening around dusk, circles of people passing around these bubbling water pipes. And they noted the rhythm, sometimes mentioning it was like one puff, one chorus, maybe someone sings or chants after taking a hit. It suggests something really synchronized, communal, immediate, defined by that quick onset the pipe allowed. Very different from waiting hours for an edible to hit.
Yeah, a world away from quietly eating some mahjong. Okay, so plant from Asia, smoking method invented in Africa, proof in Lalibela around 1320. But if the tech was based on gourds and horns, stuff that maybe doesn't travel well or last forever, how did smoking leap from being a regional African practice to the global standard we see today?
That's the final piece. Section 4, scale and reach. The idea of smoking cannabis was brilliant, but it needed a global distribution network for the hardware. And that network was provided by a completely different plant tobacco and kicked into high gear by the Columbian Exchange.
Right. After 1492, tobacco from the Americas just floods Europe, Asia, Africa. And it wasn't just the leaf. It was the whole culture of smoking, including the tools.
Exactly. Tobacco standardized the equipment. Suddenly, you had mass-produced clay pipes, cheap and durable. You had metal chabooks in the Ottoman world, eventually fancy glass hookahs. Tobacco essentially built the global infrastructure for smoking as a mass ritual, accessible to almost everyone.
And cannabis, with the African precedent for inhalation already established, just slipped right into that infrastructure, kind of rode tobacco's coattails.
Perfectly put, it rode shotgun. The African innovation proved inhalation was the faster, more controllable way. When tobacco made the tools cheap and universal, cannabis users just adopted them. The local calabash gourd gets replaced by the widely available clay pipe or hookah. And suddenly, that quick-hit cannabis ritual could go global.
Can we see examples of this crossover happening, where tobacco pipes clearly start being used for cannabis too?
Oh, definitely. Look at India again. Under the Mughals, the chillum, that straight conical pipe, becomes really common for smoking cannabis, especially among holy men, sadhus. Meanwhile, over in Persia and the Ottoman lands, the hookah, the qualen, starts bubbling with hashish right alongside the tobacco. The demand for that faster cannabis effect was already there, thanks to the African innovation. The tobacco trade just provided the means.
It's such a layered story, not just one origin point, but these waves of innovation meeting trade, meeting existing culture.
And what you really need to take away is that every single way people consume cannabis today, passing a joint, hitting a bong, even vaping it all, carries echoes of this complex history.
So let's try and wrap this up. Asia gives the world the plant and the first idea. Eat it, drink it, take it slow.
Right.
Then Africa, independently, figures out the pipe, gives it speed, makes it an instant ritual, totally changes the game chemically and socially.
Yep. Centuries ahead of the curve.
And finally, tobacco comes along and provides the mass-produced pipes and the global network. It gives the African innovation scale and reach.
It's a fantastic example of how global habits aren't neat lines. They're often sparked by local genius, someone using a gourd and a horn, and then amplified by huge economic forces. It's heritage, innovation, survival, all mixed together.
Okay, so the final thought to leave everyone mulling over. What's the big what if?
Well, what if that African innovation hadn't happened? Imagine cannabis stayed as just an edible, just bang, just mudgin. A slow, multi-hour experience. Think how different its cultural and political history might be. Would it have gained that reputation, faced those prohibitions, if it wasn't for the immediate rush that smoking enabled? How much of its modern story is tied to that specific technological shift? And maybe, what else in history was just waiting for the right local invention to unlock its potential on a global scale?